To find their missing adopted daughter, my family forcibly extracted my memories. They were convinced that I had been bullying her for 3 years, which was why she left home. I smiled bitterly, my face pale, letting them extract my memories without resistance. Past scenes unfolded one by one, revealing that I was the one who had truly been bullied all along. My furious parents gradually tightened their grip on my hands, nearly fainting from shock. My usually composed brother's eyes turned red with rage, his jaw clenched in hatred. I looked up at them in confusion from their embrace and asked, "Who are you?" On the 5th day after Liliana Clark's disappearance, my family strapped me down in a private hospital laboratory. Cold metal restraints latched around my wrists, ankles, and neck, while a strange metallic cap covered my head. Several thick black cables connected the cap to a massive humming machine. They were about to extract my memories. Panic and terror flooded through me as I struggled desperately, but it was useless. My father, Isaac Clark, mother Harper Clark, and brother Ezra Clark stood before me with icy expressions, showing not an ounce of sympathy. Isaac said, "I'm asking you one last time. Where exactly did Liliana go?" He clutched a letter in his hand, his voice seething with anger, his eyes blazing with menace. 5 days had passed, and he'd completely run out of patience. Without waiting for my answer, he slammed the letter against my face. "Don't you dare tell me you don't know. Liliana's letter already hints that only you know where she went. You're behind her disappearance." Actually, I'd already read that letter. In it, Liliana wrote that she wasn't my parents' biological daughter and shouldn't continue monopolizing my father and brother. So after 3 years of fighting with me, she felt exhausted and decided to give up. She wanted to return everything to me, repeatedly emphasizing that I hadn't forced her to leave and hoping my family wouldn't make things difficult for me or pressure me about her whereabouts. Since she put it that way, everyone could see that Liliana's departure was connected to me. But I truly didn't know where she'd gone. The day Liliana left, I was still curled up shivering in the cold storage room. Ezra had punished me to sleep there because Liliana claimed the day before that I'd pushed her down the stairs. Of course, that was her false accusation. I hadn't even touched her. Yet she used that opportunity to deliberately leave, claiming she wouldn't fight with me anymore. Her behavior made it seem like everything was my fault, and Isaac, Harper, and Ezra could no longer contain their rage. I said, "I don't know where she went." I kept my head down, feeling the cold metal against my wrists and neck, and gave the same answer. I truly didn't know. For the past 5 days, I'd explained over and over again, Liliana did this on purpose. But Isaac, Harper, and Ezra just wouldn't believe me. They only ever believed Liliana. Harper said, "Scarlett Clark, why do you hate Liliana so much? You've been back in this family for 3 Christmases now. How has she ever wronged you?" Her face was deathly pale. She'd been so worried about something happening to Liliana that she hadn't slept a wink or had any appetite for 5 straight days, losing a lot of weight. Then she continued, "Have you forgotten that on the day we came to bring you home, Liliana personally made you orange juice?" She'd never set foot in a kitchen before, but just to make you a glass of her favorite orange juice, she cut her finger. Harper stepped closer, tears welling in her eyes as she looked at me. "Scarlett, please tell me where Liliana is, okay? I'm going out of my mind with worry." She cried so easily whenever it involved Liliana. I lifted my head slightly, about to say something, then stopped. In the end, I just gave a self-mocking smile. That orange juice was the beginning of my nightmare. But who would believe that? So I said nothing. Ezra suddenly stepped forward and slapped me across the face. He said, "Keep playing dumb, you bitch. This memory extractor was made just for you. Enjoy it." Ezra had never liked me, so this slap was filled with pure hatred. The blow left my cheek swollen and red, my head spinning, and blood trickling from my mouth. Isaac watched coldly, saying nothing. Harper scolded, "Ezra, why did you hit her? What if you injure her and it affects the memory extraction?" Ezra spat. She deserved it. This bitch would be better off dead. His face darkened as he pointed at me. Think about what she's done these past 3 years. The day she came home, she wet herself in the car like a wild animal. The moment she walked through the door, she made Liliana cry. Did she really think she could just waltz back in and play princess? Ezra's anger intensified. Remember when Mom had that fever? Liliana stayed up all night caring for her, barely getting any sleep, nearly collapsing from exhaustion. And her? She slept like a pig, showing zero filial devotion. Then he grabbed my bleeding mouth, snarling viciously, "You can't even handle something this simple without being pathetic." That says everything about your true nature. You're a selfish, unfilial wretch who isn't worth a single strand of Liliana's hair. My mouth throbbed with pain. but with his grip on it, I couldn't speak. I wanted to defend myself, but remembering how countless attempts at explanation over these 3 years had earned nothing but their distrust, I gave up. Yes, I'm an unfilial, selfish wretch, while Liliana is the devoted daughter you all cherish. Isaac said coldly, "Enough, don't injure her. The memory extraction is what matters." Harper wiped the blood from my face and sighed softly. "Scarlett, don't blame Ezra for hating you. You really have done wrong. Yes, I've done wrong. Wrong." I laughed bitterly at myself again. Strangely, Ezra's slap had somehow scattered the fear that Machine had instilled in me. Pain can break your heart, but it can also numb you. So come on, memory extractor, go ahead and torture me. I closed my eyes and remained perfectly still. Ezra snorted coldly. "You are not struggling anymore?" Smart. He was about to proceed when Isaac stopped him. Isaac had reached the limits of his patience, but still gave me one last chance. "Scarlett, this device is Ezra's company's latest product, highly unstable and likely to damage your brain. So I'm asking you one final time. Will you tell us where Liliana went? Just tell us and I'll give you $10 million, then send you back to the countryside. From then on, we'll have no relationship whatsoever." Hearing his words, I opened my eyes, filled with instinctive fear and trembling. I shook my head almost immediately. "I don't want to go back." Ezra sneered. "Look at her. She came back to our family just for money. For money, she despises the adoptive parents who raised her. Now she won't even take $10 million. She just wants to play princess in our house. She's probably thinking about inheriting our family fortune later. How despicable." Both Isaac and Harper's faces darkened. I had always been greedy for money, picking up and hiding even pennies from the ground. They absolutely hated this trait of mine. Now, learning that I was unmoved by $10 million and insisted on staying in the city, they despised me even more. I explained in a trembling voice, "I won't go back to the countryside because..." Before I could finish, Isaac waved his hand. "Fine, I won't give you another chance. Jacob Garcia, come in." A man in a white lab coat, holding a peculiar pocket watch, walked in. He looked serious and respectfully greeted Isaac, Harper, and Ezra. Isaac coldly ordered, "Let's begin. Extract her memories directly. I need to know immediately where my daughter went." "Yes, sir." Jacob walked to the device without hesitation, pressed 3 buttons, then took out 3 metal helmets and handed them to Isaac, Harper, and Ezra. "Mr. Isaac Clarke, the 3 of you sit down together, put on the helmets, and you'll be able to watch the subject's memories through the built-in view-blowing screens. Based on our analysis of the subject's brain capacity, we estimate she can recall 3 times. More than 3 times would be extremely dangerous and would definitely damage her brain, causing epilepsy, bleeding, memory loss, and other symptoms." Ezra eagerly put on his helmet and sat in the chair next to me. 3 times is enough. "First, let her recall Liliana's disappearance. She definitely knows." Jacob hesitated. "The subject's emotional state is unstable. I suggest we slowly guide her through hypnosis to recall Ms. Liliana Clarke's disappearance. We can't be too hasty." Ezra sighed unhappily upon hearing this. Isaac and Harper nodded, letting Jacob arrange everything. After a while, all 3 of them had put on their helmets and ready. Jacob turned off the harshest lights, then stood in front of my device. I looked at him numbly, motionless. Then Jacob pressed a button on my helmet. I immediately heard soothing, peaceful music, and something seemed to be injected into the back of my head. "Ms. Clarke, please don't resist. The more you fight it, the more painful it will be. You might as well." "Okay." I completely relaxed. Jacob paused, somewhat surprised. However, he quickly got into character, picking up the pocket watch and gently swaying it in front of me. He said, "Ms. Clarke, sleep. In your dreams, you'll remember your first meeting with Ms. Liliana Clarke. Those were your beautiful times together." Jacob's voice was deep and hypnotically compelling. I slowly closed my eyes and quickly fell into slumber. A period of time seemed to unfold before me, and distant memories shone into my mind like rays of evening light. I slowly opened my eyes and found myself sitting in a luxury sedan. This was Ezra's car, a Maybach S680. Ezra was driving himself, and in the car sat Isaac, Harper, me, and Liliana, whom I was meeting for the first time. We were happily heading home. I had dreamed of the scene from my first trip home. I turned my head to look at Liliana, who had her hair in a ponytail and a smile as bright as sunshine. She held my hand and said, "Scarlett, you're so tall. Are you 5 feet 4 inches? I'm only 5 feet 2 inches. I'm too short." She pouted, gently stroking the back of my hand, and continued, Scarlett, You must have suffered a lot in the countryside. Your hands are all cracked. You'll never have to do farm work again. Isaac and Harper sat nearby, watching us with smiles. I felt somewhat awkward. My shabby appearance made me look like a beggar next to Liliana, but her warmth touched me, and I thanked her gratefully. Liliana waved her hand dismissively and suddenly pulled out a cup of orange juice from her backpack. She said, "Scarlett, our family has everything. I don't need to give you expensive gifts. Whatever you want, you can buy for yourself anyway. But this orange juice is different," Liliana said with a hint of pride. "I love drinking orange juice and often have the nanny make it. This time I made you a cup myself. I hope you'll like it." Isaac joked, "What a cheap gift." Liliana glared at him. "Humph, what do you know? My gift may not be expensive, but it's full of heartfelt sentiment." Everyone in the car laughed, creating a joyful atmosphere. I blinked, thinking to myself, how nice. So this is how daughters can interact with their fathers. I took the orange juice and drank it all under Liliana's expectant gaze. I thought, it tastes really good. But before long, I suddenly needed to use the bathroom, and this urge was like a bursting dam that I couldn't control at all. My legs began to tremble, my lips turned pale, and cold sweat broke out on my back. I couldn't wet myself. This was my first meeting with Isaac, Harper, and Ezra. I absolutely could not urinate in Ezra's car. I wanted to get out, but we were on the highway. "Scarlett, what's wrong? Are you carsick?" Liliana noticed my distress and gripped my hand tightly. Isaac, Harper, and Ezra all looked at me. Ezra thoughtfully cracked the window open a bit, but the breeze made me need to urinate even more. I asked fearfully, "Can I get out of the car?" "This is the highway. We're still 6 miles from the service area. Why don't you rest on my shoulder?" Liliana directly pulled me to lean against her shoulder. Isaac, Harper, and Ezra also urged me not to be nervous, saying we were all family. I opened my mouth, clenched my legs tighter, and finally decided to tell the truth. The moment the machine activated, I felt a sharp pressure bloom at the base of my skull, like a cold hand reaching into the core of my mind and pulling memories loose one by one, forcing them into the open. I had braced myself for pain, but what hit me first was humiliation, the raw, silent kind that comes when your truth is finally exposed in front of people who never cared to see it. The holographic feed lit up before Isaac, Harper, and Ezra, displaying the memory in vivid, immersive detail, as if they were standing inside the scenes of my past instead of beside me in that sterile lab. The first vision showed Liliana weeping dramatically on the stairs, clutching her elbow while I stood several feet away, wide-eyed and silent. A replay of the false accusation, me supposedly pushing her, but the memory clearly revealed the truth. I hadn't even touched her. Liliana had flung herself backward, all while stealing a glance to ensure someone was watching. Harper gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as her eyes locked on the truth they had refused to believe for 3 long years. Ezra, silent for once, stared in a way I had never seen. His jaw tight, his eyes darting rapidly between me and the image playing out before him. The memory shifted, and now it was the cold storage room. Me curled up in the corner, shivering under a thin blanket while the voices of my family echoed from the hallway outside, discussing whether I'd learned my lesson yet. Harper looked away, her face pale. But the machine didn't stop. It kept dragging out every lie Liliana had spun, every false smile, every cruel manipulation. Memories of her switching out my medications, blaming me for things she'd done, whispering venom into Harper's ear when no one else was around. Slowly, their expressions cracked. Harper began to cry. Not the dramatic sobbing she used to perform for Liliana, but quiet, confused tears, like she couldn't reconcile the perfect daughter she loved with the calculated sociopath she was watching unfold. Ezra clenched the armrest of his chair so tightly the plastic cracked, and Isaac, stoic, composed Isaac, looked like he'd been punched in the chest. But even as the truth bled through the screens, I didn't feel triumph, only numbness. I had wanted this vindication for so long, but now that it was here, it felt empty. I watched them watching me suffer, watched them wake up too late. Then the memory shifted again, but this one was different. It wasn't one I recognized. The colors were blurred, distorted, the sounds garbled, like a dream submerged underwater. A dark room, a narrow light slicing across my face, and Liliana, standing over me. She was whispering into a phone, her back turned slightly, unaware that I was half awake. "She's still resisting," she said, "but the memory suppression is holding. She won't remember anything useful for at least 2 weeks. After that, she's yours." My breath hitched. Harper let out a noise, part gasp, part choke. Ezra blinked, visibly shaken. Isaac sat forward, eyes locked onto the projection like it was the only thing anchoring him to reality. "They can't find out she's the key," Liliana added, lowering her voice even further. "She has fragments locked inside her brain. That's why I stayed this long. Once we extract them..." The memory ended in static. The machine flickered and went dark for a moment. Jacob, the technician, looked alarmed and rushed to the console. "That wasn't part of the requested segment," he muttered, pressing buttons frantically. "What was that?" Ezra snapped. "What the hell did she mean by key?" But no one had answers. Only I sat there, heart thudding, eyes locked on the now blank screen, feeling the cold spread through my veins. That memory, it hadn't felt like mine. Or at least, not like one I had lived consciously. It was like something buried deep, wrapped in fog, something someone had tried to hide. The helmet on my head pulsed once more, and Jacob stepped forward. "That's enough for the first sequence," he said, clearly rattled. "Her neural activity is spiking. We can't push her into another cycle without risking damage." "I don't care," Ezra said, eyes still burning. "I want to see more. I want to know everything she's hiding." "You saw it," Harper whispered. "She wasn't the one who hurt Liliana. Liliana was manipulating her." She looked between me and Isaac, her hands trembling in her lap. "That can't be real, can it?" Isaac didn't respond. He just removed his helmet slowly and turned to Jacob. "Analyze that last sequence. I want to know where it came from, who else has accessed the machine, and whether it was planted or real." I sat silently, barely breathing. I could feel blood trickling from my nose, my head pounding like someone had split my skull open from the inside. But all I could think about was Liliana's voice, calm, calculated, and deeply wrong. Fragments locked inside her brain. Once we extract them. I had no idea what she meant. I didn't understand who they were, but it explained too much. The false warmth, the obsessive clinging, the way she always watched me just a little too closely. I had thought she hated me. But maybe it was never about hate. Maybe it was about control, about access. And as that realization took root, something deeper stirred in the back of my mind, like a door creaking open. Just for a second, I remembered something else. A hallway made of glass. A woman in a white lab coat with silver eyes. A glowing screen. My name repeated over and over again. Then darkness. Jacob's voice interrupted the moment. "We need to stabilize her. The machine's picking up neural distortion." Ezra finally looked at me, truly looked at me, not with disgust, not with rage, but with something new. Uncertainty. "What the hell are you?" he whispered. And honestly, I had no idea. After that fragmented memory surfaced, Liliana whispering about suppression and fragments locked in my brain, it was like something had been permanently unlatched inside all of us. The atmosphere in the lab shifted. Ezra no longer barked accusations. Harper stopped crying long enough to stare at me like she was seeing a stranger. And Isaac, always the composed patriarch, spent the entire evening on the phone with contacts I didn't know he had, making increasingly hushed and angry calls while pacing near the far end of the hallway. Meanwhile, Jacob extracted the data from the last session and began running it through various diagnostics, analyzing the neural sequences and verifying their authenticity. I could hear him muttering to himself about memory layers, blocked synaptic loops, and unauthorized triggers. He confirmed later that night, while handing Isaac a classified report with trembling fingers, that the memory wasn't implanted. It was mine. Deep, buried, encrypted even, but real. I don't know what shocked Isaac more, that I hadn't been lying, or that I had memories I wasn't supposed to. But whatever he read in that report set something off in him. Early the next morning, without even consulting me, he retrieved the original adoption records, something only he and Harper had access to. I was still recovering in a hospital bed, weak and pale from the previous session, when Isaac entered the room, holding a folder so tightly it bent in his hands. Ezra and Harper followed behind him like ghosts. "You were adopted at age 10, Isaac began, his voice low and strained, like each word cost him something. "We were told you came from a failed foster placement in rural Southridge, but there's no record of that facility, not anymore." He tossed the folder onto the foot of my bed. The adoption was brokered through an organization called Samara Institute. It was registered briefly, then deregistered. No public records, no trace of other adoptions. only yours." I stared at him, the words washing over me like static. Harper added, her voice trembling, "We were told you had memory damage. That's why you were quiet, that you'd been through trauma. We never questioned it." Of course they hadn't. They had taken one look at me, mute, anxious, scarred in ways no child should be, and assumed the trauma explained everything. But now I understood. The trauma wasn't just life in foster care. It was whatever happened before I even got there. Isaac looked at me again, this time not as a burden, not as an intruder in their perfect family, but as a puzzle with pieces that had been deliberately hidden from view. Ezra, still clearly struggling with everything that had been uncovered, spoke last. "That woman in your memory," he said, voice hard but unsure. "The one with the silver eyes. She matches descriptions from old security logs I pulled from an archived digital thread. A former researcher. Name, Dr. Emmeline Roth. She disappeared years ago after Samara's collapse." He stepped closer, holding up his phone to show me a blurred security cam still. A woman in a white lab coat mid-stride, her features barely visible. But even from the grainy pixels, I recognized her. Not from that single memory. From somewhere deeper, instinctively. Like a forgotten nursery rhyme that resurfaces on your tongue. I knew her, but I didn't know how, or why. The pieces weren't fitting, but they were definitely from the same puzzle. Ezra lowered his voice, almost to a whisper. "Liliana met with her, 2 years ago. We traced an encrypted account linked to her college fund. A private transfer from a facility owned by Roth's last known affiliate." Harper blinked. Why would Liliana... But the question died in the air, because the answer was becoming horrifyingly clear. Liliana had not been randomly adopted into the Clark family. Neither had I. We had both been placed. Like pawns on a board neither of us controlled. Only Liliana had known the rules. She had played the role of the perfect daughter, weaving herself into the hearts of Isaac, Harper, and Ezra, while slowly isolating me, keeping me disoriented, untrusted, and small. Until now. Until someone, triggered a fault in the system. Jacob re-entered the room later with another report in hand. "We found embedded neuromarkers in your scans," he said. "Patterns consistent with experimental imprinting. Your memory loss wasn't from trauma. It was induced, synthetically." He hesitated before adding, "Your brain has architecture I've never seen. Redundant loops, artificial segmentations, designed to separate certain memories from others, to keep the core identity sealed." I didn't know what to say. I barely knew what to think. My entire life, I'd been fighting for a place in this family, believing I was just broken, unworthy, rejected. But the truth was that I had been built to be lost, my reality fractured by design. Ezra sat down heavily across from me, rubbing his face with both hands. "This is bigger than any of us," he muttered. "This isn't about Liliana running away. This is about whoever made her part of something she never should have been part of. And you're not just a victim." I looked up at him sharply. "Then what am I?" He paused. "I think you're the original subject." The room went silent. Not because anyone doubted him, but because no one could deny it. Liliana hadn't been infiltrating the Clark family for her gain. She'd been monitoring me, watching me, managing the outcome of something that had started long before she arrived. And I'd been sleeping through it completely unaware. Until now. And as that truth settled in the air like dust on untouched furniture, I felt something deeper stir beneath my skin. A memory, not yet unlocked. A name. A voice. A room with white walls and no windows. I didn't say anything. But I knew. This was only the beginning. After the truth came to light, everything inside the Clark household changed, though the word household felt laughably inadequate now. We were no longer a family grappling with a disappearance. We were players at the edge of a hidden war we never chose to join. While Harper kept breaking down over old photo albums, and Ezra flipped between rage and stunned silence, Isaac took action. He reactivated dormant contacts from his time in corporate intelligence and quietly arranged surveillance on every known associate of Liliana's. As for me, I stopped sleeping. Not because I was afraid, but because I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes. White lights above my face, metal restraints on my wrists. No, not like the ones in the lab. Earlier, colder, sterile. I remembered a name, Project Echo. Not from a dream, from a room. It was written on a black file that had been opened in front of me by a woman with silver eyes. Dr. Roth. Her voice echoed now, clearer than before. Emotion is data. Memory is mutable. Identity, programmable. Those weren't metaphors, they were parameters. By the third day, Isaac requested a second memory extraction session. This time, against Jacob's warnings, he ordered it pushed beyond the safe limits. I was reluctant, but I knew what he was thinking. If Liliana had planted herself here with a purpose, then the rest of that memory, the part cut off by the system, might hold the key. I was hooked back into the chair. Ezra and Harper once again donned the neural helmets, and the machine descended into the gray depths of my past. This time, the transition was violent. No soothing music, no gentle induction. Just static and roaring white noise that tore through my skull like wind through shattered glass. I screamed, and then I saw it. I was maybe 6, sitting in a room surrounded by mirrors, not reflections, projections. Each pane showed a different version of me, laughing, crying, silent, violent, dozens of Scarlets. I sat in the center, strapped to a low seat, wires taped to my temples, tears streaking down my face as a faceless man asked me the same question over and over. What makes you real? When I didn't answer, he would raise a finger and the screen would shift. One version of me would disappear, erased. Then again, what makes you real? Over and over. Harper began sobbing again in the real world. The memory was feeding into their helmets as I screamed in that chair, the world inside and outside overlapping, blending. The next memory slammed in like a fist. Liliana, older now, sitting in a classroom beside me. But there was no school logo, no bell, no playground. This was a training facility, underground, heavily monitored, where girls with blank stares practiced smiling in mirrors. Liliana had leaned in close to me and whispered, "Don't forget, Scarlet. They said one of us is the prototype. The other is the handler. Only one gets to leave." Her voice in the memory sent chills down my back. The tension was unbearable. Then something darker emerged. A third party, watching us. Men in lab coats discussing me like I wasn't human. Saying the phrase, genetic recall sequence incomplete, and requires bonding experience failure to initiate emotional depth. I was never meant to succeed in the Clark family. I was meant to fail, to fracture, to produce an emotional threshold that could be measured, studied, controlled. And Liliana, she wasn't an orphan they took in. She was assigned. Her mission wasn't just observation, it was reinforcement. She was the fail-safe, the monitor, my jailer in sister's clothing. As this final truth poured out, the machine began to spark. Warnings flared across Jacob's console. Ezra shouted something, maybe to stop it, but the data flood couldn't be contained. My mind cracked open and poured everything it had been forced to forget. And then, blackout. I woke up 3 days later, in a different room, in a different bed. White walls, bright lights, an IV in my arm. Ezra was there, pale and silent, watching me with the eyes of someone who'd seen something they couldn't explain. "You were right," he said quietly. "Everything you said. She planned it. All of it." He slid a tablet toward me. A paused video sat on the screen. Liliana entering a building under an alias. A private genetic research facility, one Isaac had invested in years before without realizing. She hadn't disappeared. She had returned to her origin point, her creators. "She told them the subject is unstable," Ezra said, "that you're beginning to remember, that the program is at risk. She's gone dark since then. We think they've reabsorbed her." My head pounded. "So what happens now?" Ezra's jaw tightened. "They'll want to complete the project. Either reset you or terminate." I looked up at him, my voice raspy. "And what do you want to do?" His eyes narrowed. "I want to turn the game around. I want to find her. And I want to burn every last piece of this operation to the ground." For once, I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Belief. Not in Liliana. Not even in himself. In me. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one playing catch-up. I was the threat. I was the anomaly. And I wasn't going back into the cage. It took us 2 weeks to track her down. 2 weeks of combing encrypted medical databases, back-channeling old investors, and intercepting corporate traffic from networks Isaac once unknowingly funded. Liliana had returned to the core, the research facility hidden beneath the facade of a neurocognitive therapy institute called Halcyon Complex. Officially, it was shut down years ago, Unofficially, it had simply evolved, changed names, and gone deeper underground. Ezra secured clearance through a fake medical referral, posing as a guardian, bringing me in for neurological destabilization treatment. The irony was suffocating. We dressed the part, signed the forms, nodded through a dozen layers of fake compassion and polished lies from white-coated staff. But everything changed when the elevator went to B4, unauthorized, off-record, and no one stopped us. Because we were expected. The lower floor was bathed in white, almost too white, like they wanted your senses to dissolve. The moment the doors opened, I felt something shift inside me. A hum. Faint, but familiar. A vibration that resonated in my bones like an echo I'd forgotten how to hear. Two men greeted us silently, guiding us through a corridor lined with reinforced glass. Behind each panel, isolated rooms, children, teenagers, some awake, some unconscious. Some just staring, their minds clearly somewhere else. I didn't ask. I couldn't. We were led to the central chamber, circular, high-ceilinged, sterile, and there she stood, Liliana, dressed in clinical white, clipboard in hand, waiting for me like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Scarlett," she said softly, smiling. "You made it. Right on schedule." Ezra stiffened, but I held up a hand to stop him. My voice came out calm, but cold. "Why?" Liliana tilted her head as if confused by the question. "You weren't supposed to wake up this early, but I suppose that's the risk of a fractured sequence. Your mind's stronger than we predicted." She stepped closer, eyes gleaming with that same syrupy warmth I once mistook for love. "They were going to reset you again. Clean slate." But I stopped them. I convinced them it was time, that you were ready for integration. "Integration?" I echoed. "Of what?" "Of your full self," she whispered, placing a hand gently over her heart. "They only gave you fragments. Emotional data. They needed to see how pain shaped you. Rejection, love, guilt. But now it's time for you to remember what you were meant to be." She gestured to the center of the room. A chair, another machine, sleeker than before. Not restraints, receivers. Ezra stepped forward. "She's not doing anything you say." Liliana barely looked at him. "You still don't understand. Scarlett's not just a subject. She's the blueprint, the prototype that worked. She is the experiment." I looked at the chair, then at her, then at Ezra. I could feel it now, pulsing under my skin, like something buried waking up. A voice whispered in the back of my mind. Not hers, not Ezra's, mine. The part of me that had been locked away, sealed beneath years of lies and pain. I walked to the chair. Ezra protested, but I touched his arm and gave a single nod. "Trust me." I sat down. The machine activated with a soft, harmonic vibration, like the sound of breath entering a sleeping body. Liliana placed a hand on the console. "This won't erase you," she said. "It will complete you." But I was already ahead of her. As the device scanned my neural pattern, I reached in, not just passively remembering this time, but searching, calling, and I found it. The core memory, the one they never wanted me to reach. A woman in a mirrored room, not Roth, me, older, speaking to a camera. "This version will be different," I said. "More resilience, less compliance. If you're seeing this, you've broken through. That means it worked." The feed cut, but I knew. I wasn't just the subject. I was the architect. I had designed my own mind as a labyrinth to protect itself, in case everything else failed. Liliana stepped back, suddenly unsure. "Scarlett?" But I opened my eyes, and I remembered everything. Every iteration, every reset, every handler, every betrayal. I stood up from the chair, unchained, unfiltered. "This ends today," I said. "No more versions, no more control." The alarms began to blare. Ezra pulled me behind him as staff rushed in. But I wasn't afraid. I reached for the console, entered the final sequence code that had been buried in my subconscious since the beginning. Echo 0. The building dimmed. Systems began to shut down. All around us, doors unsealed. Children and patients stepped out, dazed but awakening. Liliana screamed my name, but not in anger, in panic. "You don't understand what they'll do to you," she cried. "You weren't built to live free." I turned to her one last time. "Then I'll remake what I am." We walked out into the light,